In this video, I'm going to tell you how I put the Sony A7R IV through a pretty difficult wildlife photography test and how I wish I had brought my A9II with me. Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well. I am coming to you from Iceland. I've been here for about a week and I just got back from photographing the blue morph Arctic fox. I'm going out in a couple of days to start looking for horses to photograph, but my trip photographing the blue morph Arctic fox was very interesting. I was supposed to be in the field for 6 days, but I was delayed getting into the field because of bad weather, and so I only ended up shooting for about 4.5 days. I would normally be traveling with 3 cameras, 2 Sony A7R IVs and a Sony A9II. However, I decided to leave the A9II at home because there were pretty strict carry-on restrictions for one of the flights I was taking. So the A7R IV, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is the camera that I use most of the time. For me, for what I do, which is photographing mostly mammals, the A7R IV can handle almost anything that I throw at it. However, there are times when there is a lot of action or very fast action when I do reach for the A9II. Now in this case, I had some slightly different challenges. So the first problem was that there was very little light. The sun would rise about 10:30 and set at about 4:30, but I was in a valley, and so then the sun wouldn't really appear over the mountains until about 11, and it would disappear at about 4. However, in 5 days I really only saw the sun once, and the rest of the time it was extremely overcast. And the other problem I had was that there was a lot of blowing snow, and the snow was blowing almost horizontally, and it was blowing towards the sun. So this meant that I couldn't really put the sun at my back and have the sun or the light, because I didn't really see the sun much, but to have the light on the subject, because I would end up getting a ton of snow in the lens or a lot of snow in my eyes if I was looking in that direction. So most of the time I had to shoot the other way towards the sun, or sometimes across the blowing snow, so perpendicular to the blowing snow. So this meant I wasn't really getting a lot of light on the subject, and the subject, the blue morph Arctic fox, which is basically a dark brown color, was very dark, and it was in a very bright white environment. And so I wanted to get detail on the subject, of course, but I didn't want to lose any of the detail in the snow. So exposure was a challenge, and in the worst cases, I didn't want to have the ISO up too much. When I looked at some of the early images, I wasn't happy with the amount of noise. The other problem is that the autofocus struggled at times. I missed focus a bunch of times where I knew I would never normally have had, the camera would never normally have missed focus in those kinds of situations. With a different subject, say such as a red fox, without with more light and without such extreme blowing snow. The other thing was that the animal eye autofocus, which is something that I've used a lot and I know works very well on foxes, it barely registered. In fact, it probably only kicked in about 5 times in about 4 to 5 days. So the autofocus was it worked most of the time, but it definitely wasn't where it usually is. And so for both the autofocus being snappier as well as having less noise in the images, I know that the A9II would have been a better choice. Now, of course, usually if I go to the A9II, I know I'm going to miss the resolution that I have with the A7R IV. However, in this case, I didn't really need it, and I ended up I barely used crop mode in the camera, and in post I didn't really crop much at all. Now the other thing that was interesting was that I've said in the past that I think the A7R4 is really better suited to be used with prime lenses, and I think this experience really proved it, not necessarily for me, but someone else who was shooting with me was using an A7R4, and she was shooting with a 100 to 400, and it's really struggled with the focus, and because of the smaller apertures, the ISO and the resulting noise just was not working. So she ended up shooting with the 70 to 200 f2.8, and that was a lot better. Now, I used the 400 GM for a while. I ended up in the last few days spending most of my time with the 135 GM. That's a lens I've also talked about in the past. I've marveled at how sharp it is and how fast it is, and in this case it definitely proved to be both of those things. And it was also partially because the subject moves around so quickly, and it would sort of circle around me, and as a result the 400 was often too unwieldy, and there were definitely times also when the 400 was too tight. So the 135 really ended up being the lens that I used the most, and that really sort of saved me too, because it was just snappier to focus, and also I was able to shoot at f1.8 at times. So in all, this was a very interesting test for the A7R4. I think in the end it still pulled through and I got great results with it, but I had to definitely work at it, and there were a few cases for sure where I had images that I missed focus on, where I know the A9II likely would have gotten it. So I wish I had brought the A9II with me in this particular case, but it was a good test for the A7R4. It also showed me another situation where the A9II would have worked. It wasn't really so much the action, it was just that the focus situation was a lot harder, that the light was problematic. And also in this case, I didn't really know, but I now know in this particular case I didn't really need the resolution. The 61 megapixels of the A7R4 wasn't really as much of an asset as it usually is. So I'm going to leave you with some of the other images that I took. Some of these are, a few of them are still a little bit noisy, and so I might run them through Topaz, but generally I'm pretty happy with the results, and there were a lot of challenges, but that makes it all worth it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please post below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.